I mean, I'm just curious, like how's the market for you and like what's current focus for you right now?
So the market is definitely picking up. Spring typically is our busiest time of year because the weather's nice, everybody's starting to come out. The hangover of the holidays is done. So we're seeing a lot more buyers out right now. We're seeing more inventory coming on the market. The factors that have been affecting the market have been the higher interest rates. That's been affecting buyers as so much. It takes about 4 to 6 months for the market to catch up. So the buyers that are new to the marketplace now are okay with the current interest rates because they weren't teased with the lower interest rates a few years back. They might have heard about it. Darn it, it stinks that I wasn't ready then, but they're past that and they understand that. There's also a lot of families that are giving money to their other family members in one way or another, whether it's kids buying parents' homes, parents buying kids' homes, so that they can get into the real estate market, just because they know it's such a safe bet is that real estate will always appreciate, especially when you're in Los Angeles, in our market, and especially even more of a micro market on the west side of Los Angeles. It will always appreciate. Safest bet, put it in real estate on the west side of Los Angeles. So that we're seeing happen as well. So with that, there is an influx of buyers that are coming out to the market. And then what has also been an issue for us has been the low inventory. So really what has, like last year, what created the market as far as inventory goes were people that needed to sell for death, moving away, divorce, the real bottom of the barrel kind of reasons for selling real estate. There wasn't as much of, buying to buy up, selling to buy up, or, selling to buy down. There wasn't much of that because of the inventory. I mean, because of the low interest rates, higher interest rates.
Yeah, so
So
the sad reasons rather than the happy reasons.
exactly. I mean, hey, there's with any type of sale, I've always seen the relief on my sellers, no matter what the reason why they're selling. If there's a feeling of relief, there's a feeling of, even when somebody's selling because, somebody passed away, there's a relief because now that is a beautiful inheritance to their family members. And so there's always a really nice feeling with it and relief when somebody sells their property. And especially knowing that like another family might be moving in, even if it's a developer, they're going to build a beautiful home so a family can move in and enjoy that property. So that's how I always see it and make sure to convey to my clients. So we're seeing that. And then with that, we are seeing more inventory coming on the market. And a lot of it is bottled up from people not having to sell for the past probably 2 years, we'll call it, year and a half at least. And so, there's everybody needs, 2 years, every 2 to 3 years, people are, get antsy. So then there's the people that are, the 5 to 7 year itch, which really need to move. And, a third baby is going to always make somebody move out of a 3 bedroom home. So that's also starting to come out to the market right now, which is, it's nice to see, properties up. What I'm also experiencing is I have I'm calling it my unsolicited 2 cents, but since you asked me now, I guess it is solicited. Two things that are so important for sellers in this market, on top of what I've always said, painting, staging, and landscaping are the top 3 things that you can do to sell a house. On top of that, I'd like to add, staging is more important than ever if you are thinking about not doing it before, and moving out. Nobody wants to buy somebody else's house that they're living in. It feels weird. It's awkward. And when they're in the market and most of the houses are with people not living in them, and yours is the one that's lived in, it just feels weird. And there's always going to be something about it. There's an energy, there's smells sometimes, there's a look, a worn in feeling. And you don't want to, when the market is tricky like it is now, you don't want to give buyers one thing to use against your house. So my suggestion is to, if possible, move out, but definitely stage and figure out a way to live in your house with it staged and looking beautiful. And then the other thing is, which is really important, is to price it in line with the market. Do not try to be cute and price it high because you hope somebody's going to come in high, and you're okay even if they come in with a lower number, because buyers aren't going to negotiate against themselves. They're not going to negotiate against themselves. They're too smart. They're too savvy. They've been seeing what's going on in the market. So price it in line with the market, with where the market comps are, and not being too much higher, not being too much lower. Just price it right there. And then if your house is checking all the boxes, the market will speak to you.
So I think that's kind of an interesting topic in itself, is pricing your home, because we're talking about psychology, right? We're talking about coaching,
Yes.
talking about performance, but there's a psychology of that, right? And there's an ego involved in that. And I think that can be difficult on both sides. A family has an expectation for what they want to get for their home, and an agent has to be realistic with them enough to make sure that they don't set expectations too high, but they also have to be able to win the listing, right? Like, so
Exactly.
that would be something I'd be interested in, is how do you manage that with a potential seller where you're in a listing appointment and you know what the right amount is, but you feel that from them where they're saying we want it to be higher.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because this is something that you taught me, Geoff, is that when you're coming from a place of self-worth and you're coming from a place of confidence and a place of integrity, and you're conveying that to your clients. Now, I have a lot of experience, so I have a lot of confidence that I can stand behind with my experience to be able to talk to a client and be able to have them listen to me and tell them the truth. And when an agent is newer and doesn't have the experience or doesn't have that confidence behind them, it's harder to be able to be really adamant about what I'm seeing in the market, or where they're at. And so, but if you can come from a place of integrity, and you can come from a place of this self-worth, that you do know what you're talking about, and you are being, really in your morals and your values, when you're telling the truth to your client, they're going to see that and they're going to experience that.
Okay. I mean, I get that. I think when it's like, trust me, this is the price, right? And you
Yeah.
feel good about knowing that you can say, trust me, because you do know what the price should be. But what happens when they won't budge? Then it's just, that's not the right client for you.
I mean, it's hard because, there's always a buyer and there's always a seller, right? And most clients, most people will find that that happy medium in order to sell. That's where the market is set. It's not set by me. It's not set by you, unless we're buying and selling our own houses. But and so it's hard to like let go of somebody. I mean, I just, I'll, there's always the give and take. I mean, I have a client right now, and, she's in marketing, she's in branding. So she has her notes for all the pictures and how they should be. And, and I'm giving it to her. This is what she wants to do. This is how she wants to add to it. And then afterwards, I'm like, I get that, but I've sold 500 homes. So I know what buyers are looking for, and I know what is selling them. So, there's that part. So I'll give somebody, I'll give you that time. We can do that for 2 weeks. This is my advice. We can use your price for 2 weeks. But I know in my experience that if after 2 weeks we're not getting a response, then we need to adjust, because this is the market. We're in a very fluid market, especially where I am right here in
Yeah.
LA.
And I think your point about having integrity and having trust in your own abilities, it's, you do your best, you bid it at what you think it's worth, and you make that presentation on, here's what I think your house should sell for, and you do your best and you walk away knowing that you did your best, whether you got it or not.
Exactly. And, I also, and we talked about this in our first meeting, the dreaded day after the Super Bowl. I'll always remember that. You're like, I'm in Haddonfield, New Jersey. I'm like, oh gosh, I can only imagine
Yeah.
being the gray in the air right there. But I remember in that first, we talked about the law of attraction, and there's all different ways to interpret it and to read into it. But there is, if you're acting in your integrity and you're acting in your values and you're acting in honesty, you're going to attract somebody who will as well and who will respond to you. And if they're not, then maybe they're not the right client, and maybe that's that's there for somebody else.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And I think that actually leads to something that a lot of the agents that I worked with your blessing last year, I think there's an element of being true to who you are and having people feel that comfort with yourself. And I do think that's an important skill to have. Not not the secret itself or the law of attraction, but the self-awareness and the
Mm-hmm.
of being comfortable with who you are and being comfortable with your style as an agent, being comfortable with how you price things, being comfortable with how you have those conversations, because I think people feel when you're uncomfortable and when you're not.
Absolutely. And I remember we had this conversation, and then I'll let you elaborate, but for newer agents where it's not fake it till you make it, right? You're coming from exactly what you just said, right? How would you coach somebody who's newer and
Yeah,
say, and somebody's telling them fake it till you make it, and make up stuff as you're going along?
because you probably hear that a lot in the LA real estate scene.
Yes.
I mean, we hear it a lot everywhere. I hear it every day in sport, right? And I really don't believe in fake it till you make it. I think the most important thing you can do is be genuine with who you are and portray that to other people as well. So I don't want people faking it. So and I'm thinking about a specific example with one of the agents there that was kind of saying, I feel inadequate because I don't know this neighborhood. Like I'm sitting this open house, it's not my listing. I don't know this area as well as I know Venice.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and then he even said, fake it till you make it kind of, and I was like, well, no, let's not fake it till you make it. It would be much easier for you to just say, look, I don't know this area as well. I'm just getting to know it. Tell me, you tell me, where are the good restaurants here? What are listings like here? What do you think the neighborhood needs? And that then you can engage someone in an open house, whether they're a neighbor or whether they're an actual serious buyer. But that's going to be a much easier conversation to have than to try to pretend like you know the neighborhood and then be paper thin on it and one question in be exposed.
Absolutely. And that goes to what my number one rule of sales is listening. So if you can elicit information from somebody and listen to them, then you can connect with them, and then you can work on the sale.
Yeah.
Something isn't telling.
And I think even that's a good point. I think that maybe how we worked together in the first place, right? I had never worked with a real estate agent
Yeah.
before when I talked to you, and I didn't pretend like I had,
Yeah.
right? And so, like, I think that's something that I learned in my career as well, even just in general business, because I started doing this when I was 24, and I knew a lot about helping people with performance. I didn't know anything about their businesses, and I didn't really know much about business in general. And so
Mm-hmm.
early on in my career, I think I felt very insecure about, not having business classes in my undergrad and not having an MBA and not having, more strategic kind of experience. And so I would try to sound like I knew what I was talking about in some of those meetings with C-level kind of executives, and it didn't work out. And when I stopped trying to do that and just said, "Tell me about your business. Tell me what I need to know that's important so I can help you identify how to be better at it," instead of, "Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about," right? Like that just didn't
Yeah.
work.
Totally. And then you had the confidence in your own intelligence and in the ability to do homework and whatever you needed to do based off of what they're telling you. That comes from your self-worth and your confidence, like, okay, I can figure this out. I just need to know more about it and to hear what they need.
Right, right. And I think also maybe just my own comfort level in my business and what I do to say I'm willing to lose this client. Someone called me and they want me to coach their agents, and I would love to do that. It sounds really interesting, but I'm not going to pretend like I know something about real estate other than being a customer.
Yeah. And what was your experience with coaching real estate agents coming from coaching athletes?
It's funny. I have done a lot of work with people in different kind of sales positions. I don't think I've ever worked with any specific job type that is exactly like working with a professional baseball player more than working with real estate agents. It is exactly the same challenge. It's a completely
Mhm.
different world, but the look on people's faces when they haven't put something in escrow or when they haven't, gotten a listing in a while, they, just and ultimately I haven't made a sale in a while, right? That same feeling of I need to make a sale is I need to get a hit with a second baseman in double
Yeah.
A. And I need to get through a start without getting pulled in the fourth inning. It's exactly the same feeling. And so I thought that was so exciting and so interesting. And really, I think it's propelled me in working with real estate agents to be able to say, oh yeah, I know exactly what this is. I didn't know, I don't know all the nuances of real estate, but I know exactly how to help someone be better in an open house and be better in connecting with people and be better in sticking to their process so they can get through some of those tough times and get on a roll.
And when we first met and we're talking and it was, a conversation. Now I'm familiar with sports, so I was able to really glean from you what you were talking about with sports, and I could see how that would relate to real estate. And you were talking to me about your real estate experience because you had just bought a house and sold a house and had some experience with it. And every analogy you've used from sports translates to real estate. And like to what you said, it's also on top of that. So that's what I really liked about what you had to bring to it. And then in contrast to who the traditional real estate agent coaches are, and there's a few out there and they have a formula, and their formula is being, door knock, door knock, door knock, cold call, cold call, cold call. And, it's kind of just telling you what to do. And it's telling you actions to do. And then they're saying, it's the law of numbers. If you cold call 100 people and one person answers and you get a sale, then there you go, and and then knowing the personalities behind most of the people that I've come into that have done that, it's not really it's not the most fun way to be coached. It's not the most fun experience to have somebody just yelling at you, telling you what to do and telling you to do things that you don't like to do and not going around it. And I know you actually still talk to the agents about doing the similar things that they were, cold calling, door knocking, social media, like the three things that they're all talking about. But you came at it with a completely different approach.
Yeah.
How's your approach that was different than like just hammering it down and telling people about how to do
I think what's interesting, I got a bunch of answers on that, but
it? Good.
what's really interesting to me, especially about that style, real estate coaching and real estate agents and the idea of I have to make X number of calls a day or I have to, whatever it is, some kind of nurture contact. Um, Everybody knows they have to do that. They don't need to be told that they have to do it. It's why aren't you doing that? I think that is the real question. And I think my approach is about helping people understand some of those building blocks in themselves that keep them from that. Where's the discomfort in doing this? And then I think the other part that I learned along the way is, and I think this is an important piece for anybody in sales, I think what happens a lot is people do the calls and they don't get the results. And so then they're like, well, I did all the calls and nothing happened. So I just that doesn't work for me, right? And then a month later we're talking about how they're doing, and they're like, you know what? The most amazing thing happened out of the blue. This person that I haven't talked to in 7 months called me and said they're ready to sell their home. It was like the most total random thing. So like, I don't need to make 100 calls a day, because this random stuff will just happen to me. And I think the lesson that I learned in that is it's those calls and the work that you do pays off, but you don't
Mhm.
know when it's going to pay off. And you have to be willing to know that you're not going to know when it's going to pay off. But it's not a one-to-one thing. It's not like you make 100 calls and you make a sale that day. You make 100 calls, and 7 months later, someone calls you out of the blue, and it's not really out of the blue.
Yeah, because you called them 7 months ago.
Right, right.
And how would you translate that to sports? Because that does seem a little bit different. Like if, let's just say it's somebody that, is at batting practice, right? And they're going to hit 100 balls. And then when they get in the game, they want to hit three, right? So right away, they don't want to wait 7 months.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so I guess, a very common concept that I've heard hitting coaches talk about for 20 years is it takes 2,000 at bats to really know who you are as a hitter.
Mm,
And so hitters will get through a season and a half, and they're struggling and they're struggling and they're doing the work, and they're, in the cage, and they're working on their swing, and they're working with me, and they're still not getting the results. But it's, you just have to keep on putting those little deposits in the bank and knowing at some point it's really going to click, but you don't really quite know when it's going to click.
okay. I like it.
Yeah. So I think, and I mean, people talk about that, like the 10,000 hour rule, right? Like, I think there's a lot of that in sport as well, where you have to put in so much work to become really great at something. And, the fallacy of that is just because you put in 10,000 hours doesn't mean you're going to be great. You have to have some,
Mhm.
you have to make some adjustments along the way. But I think being willing to put in that work and know that even if you're not getting results day to day, that you are going to get where you want to go.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I'll tell you, the agents that really responded, I mean, I saw a difference with all of the agents that coached with you last year. And really what it translated to, what I saw out of them was more of an ease. It was almost like, oh, okay. It wasn't that, like, we call it sometimes ooh to desperation. When somebody's like, you smell so desperate, and they kind of just let that go. And when that fades away, then you're able to get back into your integrity and, confidence and self-worth.
Right. And somehow people know. People
Hmm.
just seem to know when you're trying too hard.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they
So,
do.
so maybe we can take this a different, flip this, so I'm pitching and you're hitting now, because like I think there was something about your love of sport that we connected on. So I'm curious, how do you use that? How do you use the things that you learned from sport, or that you learned from me? But like, I think you have a lifetime of taking these lessons from the sport world and applying them. So how do you do that on a daily basis in your life?
Hmm, it's a good question. I think one is consistency. So being consistent with your workouts, right? So being consistent with, if it would be in sports, it would be working out, and consistency in working out. I think being well-rounded as well. So my life isn't just one sport, right? It's which is, for professional athletes, it's a little bit different than, somebody that's playing. But, if a college athlete, they're going to school, they're taking classes, right? You have to have other aspects of it. So having that, um, and those two are really important, I think, is to be more well-rounded as far as not just working all the time. And really, I said it earlier, selling is about listening, right? Sales is about listening, and then in that same sense, if we're going to use the word listen, it's listening to myself. It's listening to things, not just listening to make the sale. It's listening to the environment. It's listening to the market. It's listening to market conditions and not taking it personally, right? It's not like the market's not happening to me, right? The fact that nobody's buying this house isn't happening because of me. It's, there's other factors about it. And so taking the personalization a little bit out of it, that, this is a job, and I'm here to help people. And, if they want to choose to listen to my advice, or they want to go along with it, there's different aspects of it, and not being so attached to the outcome. And when
Yeah,
you let go of the outcome, guess what? It's always a great outcome.
there it is. That's a sport metaphor right there, right? And I think you, whether you know it or not, I think your point about identity is a good one, right? Like
Mhm.
you're not just a real estate agent, right? Like there are all these other aspects to who you are as a person. And to be able to separate those two, I think that's something I see that athletes have difficulty with, is how do I separate the person from the athlete? And
Mhm.
I think if you're able to have a healthy detachment from what you do and who you are, I think that makes it easier to take those things personally.
That's a really great point. And at first I was thinking like, well, athletes, we put them on a pedestal and it's all about them as a person. But really, real estate agents are very similar, right? Not necessarily being put on a pedestal, but they're the individual. Like, how is that person going to help you? And there's a clicking as far as a personality goes, right? And then there's also the experience and all these other aspects of it. But
Mm.
if you're just that, then it's going to be hard for people to click with you and connect with you.
Sure. And I think another place there's a real similarity in professional sports and in real estate is it's hard. It's hard to differentiate yourself, right? Like there's a lot of agents, there's a lot of good agents. I think that's one of the things that you see with minor league baseball players is they're the best in their town. And then they get drafted and they come to professional baseball and everybody's really good. And it can be scary for a little while. And even the really good ones, you know, aren't going to make it. In a draft class of 40 players, if you get two big leaguers, you're doing a good job. So a lot of really good players don't make it. And I think that competition for getting a listing, competition for have even having a buyer, and the competition for having your offer accepted, there's a lot of competition.
Absolutely. And then along that same thread, especially for baseball players, you can be the best player in your town and you make it to, a great, organization, and maybe the team isn't clicking this year. Maybe the players aren't all, you're not able to stand out and highlight your expertise. And as a real estate agent, being on your own is really tough. I really recommend being with a team. I really recommend, you know, working to your strengths and having people help you who work to their strengths, because you can't do it all. And to have that nice synergy about it is really important as well. And to just your quality of life, right? I mean, if I were, there's people that can do my social media for me. So why am I trying to do it when it takes me 2 hours to do one post and it will take somebody, you know, 15 minutes. So hire them out.
So how, I mean, that's a good thought too about picking a team is, the thing that I really heard a lot and saw very quickly with the Pardee family is that it
Mhm.
is family, right? And so like how would you advise people to pick a real estate group or to pick a team to join?
That's a good question. I would recommend to, you want to see who top producers are and who are the top producers in the area. And do any of them resonate with you, because if they do, that's somebody, and it's, interview them, just like we ask our clients to interview us, interview the other agents and see if there's somebody that you click with them as a person and with their values and with their work ethic. And, I believe that there's always going to be a connection.
Okay. So you just said something else that made me think of something that you said that you ask your clients to interview you. How much, when you go into a client meeting, how much is preparation important and how much is just being in that moment with them important in winning a client?
Mm. I definitely, preparation is very important. Absolutely. And because I've been doing it for so long, I have such a formula of doing it that it's like, it's very easy for me to, I know exactly what to look at in order to be able to be prepared to go in. But I'll go in and have done all the preparation and said, oh, this is what this house is going to be worth. I can tell, this is what it is, but it can all go out the window literally when you walk in, and, the seller has a different motivation for selling. They've done updates to the house that you didn't know about. There's all sorts of different, other factors that can alter the course of what your homework presented. So I think it's probably about, I would say 50-50. I would say it's just as important to do your homework, but it's just as important to be present in the moment, listen to them, because when somebody's selling a house, there's all different reasons behind it, and you need to know what their motivations are. And the toughest clients that I have are clients that don't need to sell, or they don't really have much motivation to sell their house. And those are always the most challenging, because there's not any movement there with it as far as needing to it. So you have to find out what that is. And if they don't have one, then you can either help create one for them or give them some ideas for what could be them. I've met with people before and they just want to know the value of their home. And I've told them, I'm like, you need to know where you're going next before you can sell this. You don't even know where you want to move to. Why don't you start looking at houses, right? Like, and they're like, oh, I don't want to stay in Los Angeles. I want to move someplace else. I'm like, well, where do you want to go? They want to go to, like a sleepy beach community. Okay, why don't you try Ventura, or why don't you try these places? And those are, more affordable. There's just like a lot of, I mean, as a coach, I'm sure you see this as much. It's like you're more a therapist sometimes than you are even, coach kind of sometimes has that, but as a real estate agent, you're just as much as a life coach for somebody or a therapist sometimes.
Yeah,
Helping.
well, I think you're hitting on kind of one of my pillars, which is knowing what you want, right? Like,
Mhm.
if you don't know what you want, how are you going to get anything?
Yeah, exactly.
I do that with I don't think I do that with any of the agents, but I do it with baseball players a lot, especially with hitters, where hitters are so, you have to have an approach to hitting, right? An approach to hitting is about, do I know what I'm looking for at the plate? Because
Mhm.
I can't look for a fastball and a curveball and a changeup. I'm not going to hit any of them. And so most often we're looking for fastballs. And I learned a very valuable lesson early in my career where, early on I was talking to some former big leaguers who were coaches and they were asking me about visualization. And I said, yeah, well, wouldn't, if you were facing Randy Johnson, wouldn't you want to visualize hitting his slider before you faced him? And they all started laughing. And I'm like, well, what's funny? And they're like, I don't think I ever hit Randy Johnson's slider. I was like, okay, I get it now. But every hitter has to have an approach. They have to say, I'm looking for the fastball away, or I'm looking for the fastball in, or I'm looking for off speed up in the zone. And when they get away from that, that's when they get into trouble. And so I'll say, what's your favorite restaurant? And what's your favorite restaurant, Karen?
Uh, Good question. We'll say Pit Fire Pizza.
So Pit Fire Pizza. So this is a sit down place, or you walk up to the counter and you order. How does that work?
You walk in and you order, and then you sit down and they bring it to you.
Okay, so when you walk in and you're up there in line and you say, I'm sorry, I don't really know what I want today. what are they going to say to you?
Stand aside while I help the next person until
Right.
you know what you want. Yeah.
Right. But you're not getting any pizza until you say, I would like a mushroom and pepperoni with extra cheese, right? And
Yeah.
then you do that and you sit down and they bring it to you. And that's, getting back to the law of attraction, to me,
Mhm.
that's what that is. It's deciding what you want.
Mhm.
You don't know what you want, you don't get any food.
Yeah.
And until you say, this is what my order will be, you don't eat. And I believe the same thing is true for a hitter who's saying, I want the fastball on the outer half of the plate. And I think the same thing is true for a real estate agent who's saying, I want to move up to selling $5 million homes this year. And I think the same thing is true for a seller who's saying, I want to sell my home and do this. But if
Mhm.
no, I guess that's your point, is like if they don't have any motivation, you're listening for and probing for why are we doing this and what are we doing next? And they're like, I don't know, then it's really difficult because they don't have something that they want.
Mhm. Absolutely. And I imagine that what you experience with sports is just as much as I experience in real estate, is that we can talk all day long about the steps. We can talk about, the market conditions. We can talk about practice, all of these things, but there's emotions that are behind it. And there's our client's emotions, and it's an emotional transaction for both the buyer and the seller. And then me being, like I said earlier, trying to be, really just in a neutral position and not taking it personally so that I can help navigate that will help. And I'm sure for athletes, it's very similar because they have their own emotions, right?
I think
And you have to let those
emotion,
emotions, keep those emotions out of the game.
yeah, I think when we get our emotions or some kind of past history involved in that, it can cloud what we want, and then we end up wanting two different things at the same time, and it's the same
Mhm.
thing. We don't get anything that way either. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think you're right. I think sometimes we'll say, I want to hit the fastball away, but I gotta get a hit today or I'm gonna get sent down, right? That's the emotion of that's making it harder for me to just stick with my approach.
Yeah. Yeah. That's tough.